Remember the days when we wore our exhaustion like a badge of honor on our sleeve? We believed that the busier we were, it communicated the more important we were. At least that was what was happening in my world. Sending emails in the wee hours of the morning said you could work like a machine like nobody else. And those who required a lot of sleep were made to feel like they were less than because they couldn't keep up with the rest of the world. Well, today's guest discovered that this was not necessarily the truth. And what we have today with us, I'm very excited to see what this conversation will bring. So today we have Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith. She is a board-certified internal medicine physician and a CEO of her own company, which is a professional development agency dedicated to restoring well-being in the workplace. And we need that now. She helps companies help their employees succeed at work as well as home by overcoming employee burnout and leadership overwhelm to create healthy cultures. She's a TEDx speaker and the author of several books, including the international bestseller Sacred Rest, Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity, and most recently, Set Free to Live Free, Breaking Through the 7 Lies Women Tell Themselves. So Saundra, welcome to your passion, purpose, and personal brand.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Oh, you sound like a very busy person, and I believe you probably had to take some of your own medicine in this as we go
Absolutely. I was the first partaker of the rest revolution.
Yes, that's awesome. So I'm going to get right to the burning question I have. Everywhere we look, we see people that are tired, if not exhausted, or at least they tell us that. What is it that's causing this?
Yeah, I think what's causing it is a lot of us aren't really aware of what kind of tired we are. We say we're tired, but we think that that's enough of a solution or a diagnosis, is the way I look at it, to be able to get some resolution. And unfortunately, just saying you're tired just lets someone know what your symptoms are without actually getting to the root of the problem. And so that's really where I started in my own journey. I burned out over 15 years ago. And when I burned out, that's all I knew. I'm tired all the time. And, I started off initially thinking I must just need more sleep. But what happens when you get those 8-10 hours and you still wake up exhausted? And that's really when the question started hitting me. Maybe there's some other parts of me that can be tired. And now let me evaluate what those can be and what the solution is for restoring them.
All right. So that brings up the question, how much sleep people need. And I know I don't need as much sleep as, for instance, what my sister needs. And sometimes, like, she might need 9 hours and I may only need 6.5 or 7, right? So there's quite a bit of difference in there.
There is, yes.
Yeah. So why is it that we sleep and we wake up, like sometimes you wake up and you still feel like you've got like weight all over you. Like I'm not talking about weight in pounds, but it's almost like you've got 2 concrete blocks on your shoulder as you're trying to get out of bed. What is that?
Well, I believe it's a rest deficit in an area other than physical. So in my research, what we determined is there were 7 different types of rest, 7 different types of ways people could be fatigued. And so when you sleep, you are solving primarily a physical need for rest and restoration. But in many cases, you're not hitting any of the other 6. And so because of that, you can sleep for 6. It doesn't really matter the number of hours. You can get the full number that you need and still wake up tired or fatigued in one of the other 6 areas. And your body will respond to that because it still recognizes a part of myself as fatigued.
Interesting. So when we're sleeping, what is actually going on? What that rest that we have, that's physical rest. Primarily, what is happening in our bodies when we're sleeping?
Well, it depends on how well you're sleeping because all sleep is not created equal. And so when you sleep, there are multiple phases of sleep, the non-REM and then the REM sleep. And it's in the stage 4 to 5, the deeper levels of non-REM sleep that people actually get restoration. That's where cells and neurons and all these things are regenerated. However, many people struggle to actually get to those deeper levels of sleep, and they spend more time in these lighter areas of sleep, which aren't as restorative, which don't leave you feeling as refreshed. And as I mentioned, there's other ways you can be exhausted. So if you're exhausted, let's say creatively, where creative rest deficits, the way we improve those are by finding the things that inspire us, that awaken the childlike awe and wonder within us, that spark our creativity. You will never restore a creative rest deficit with your eyes closed in bed. So if you're someone who's innovative, you're thinking outside of the box, you're creating content, and you're using a lot of problem-solving skills, likely there's an opportunity for a creative rest deficit there, and sleep alone would never solve that. Same with a social rest deficit or an emotional rest deficit. These things cannot be solved with your eyes closed in bed.
All right. Well, you've just given me permission to go do some fun things. I think that's one thing that's going to happen now in my life. But, we've been also talking about reinvention this season on the show. And so here you're a practicing physician. You suddenly have this aha that you're tired. And now you have pivoted and you're this international speaker, you're a media thought leader. What is it that prompted you to finally say, okay, this is where I'm going to shift?
Honestly, I wasn't trying to shift. I was trying to save my sanity is what I was trying to do. My venture started off very selfish. I just wanted to stay within a career that was extremely demanding and that I saw all of my peers getting more and more depressed while trying to practice. And so the initial process was really, how do I stay in healthcare? And I did 15 years after the burnout. How do I stay within healthcare and be passionate about the work I'm doing, but also have energy for what I'm passionate about? And that's what I wanted. I felt like there was a sweet spot to be had if I could have the passion for the healthcare and treating patients and all of that, but actually not feel drained when I left every day. Actually have something left for my kids and my husband when I got home. And so that was the goal. And so as I started practicing that and living that, I had my colleagues asking me, what are you doing? What pill are you popping? How are you staying so happy? And started sharing it just with the people around me, sharing it with my patients, sharing it with my colleagues. It started off as me just writing some little pamphlets that literally copies of pamphlets that we were handing out to patients because I didn't have time within my clinical practice to really teach them these 7 things, but I could share bits and pieces as I felt was relevant to their situation. And that snowballed on itself. It kind of created its own wave of influence. They started sharing it with friends. Next thing I know, I'm writing a book about it. I'd written books before that, but had never really wanted to write about scientific type things. I'm a writer who writes faith-based content. So I had multiple books out on faith-based issues. And so then when I got the opportunity to write this book, and it's a lot of it's science and research that I did for my own personal journey, it wasn't a book I was trying to write, honestly. And so once I did agree to write it and release it, it took a wave of its own. I started getting calls from corporations about, hey, our team loves this stuff you're talking about with rest. Can you come in and train? And I'm like, I got a hospital call next week, so I started seeing this opportunity opening up before me, and I saw the need and I saw how the message was resonating with people. And that was really what took this next step. I could really see, I love what I'm doing. I'm treating hundreds a month, within my clinical practice. And it quickly changed to thousands a month when I stepped into this new role.
Saundra, I just got chills when you said that, like to look at the impact that you've been able to have on people and will continue to have. But I think back to those conversations you must be having with some of your other physician colleagues. We think that our physician, the doctor that we go to, has all of this research and has all of the answers. But yet when you're walking through that same struggle, and I think a lot of times that we don't get to the root of the problem. They ask what pill you are popping. Like that's typically what a lot of our healthcare relies on when we're going so quickly. But for you to dig into that, and I think about, during residency, like there was not high quality sleep during that time. Just like new mothers don't have high quality sleep. But when you look at all that and what you've been able to do, you have been able to pull it into something that, as I read, and this may even be outdated numbers, 250,000 people have taken your rest quiz. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, rest was started as, like I mentioned, when I first started with these little pamphlets I was handing out to my patients, the number one question we started hearing from people was, how do I know where to start? It's like, I'm reading about these 7. I need all 7. And I get it. If you're burned out, you feel like I need all of the rest. But, it's too much. It's too much to try to tackle all of these areas of restoration at once. And so I knew that we needed to help people be able to kind of narrow down where to begin. And so that's really where the quiz came to being. And as what I found was, whether people read the book or didn't read the book, so many people sent their friends to take the quiz, because like a wife would read the book and she'd tell her husband, hey, I want you to take this quiz, or they tell a girlfriend or something of that nature. And it just kind of, like I said, snowballed. It just started kind of getting this own wave that picked up and picked up. I know a lot of people want to do a TEDx talk and they try out for them and they do all the things and all of that. And when people ask me, oh, how was your TEDx audition? How did you get selected? Literally, I got an email sent that said, hey, would you like to open our TEDx in Atlanta? It wasn't like I sought it. It sought me out. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's not like I intentionally necessarily went after some of these things. I think sometimes if you have a message that resonates with enough people, it becomes the PR. It becomes your marketing. Yes. It just it does its own thing.
Yes. And so, when you said you weren't out to write this book, it's almost like this book was calling you. This topic was calling you to be the poster child for this is how you do it, and to be the voice in the world on how to do it. So I'm going to share with the audience, I took the REST quiz. And Saundra, I've already had a conversation with my husband this morning, telling him, hey, you need to take this quiz, because it was very revealing. I was really surprised to see my results, pleasantly surprised, because it wasn't as high as I thought it would be. My rest deficit was not as bad as I thought it would be. But I also want to mention, it's been about 6 to 8 months ago that I paused. I took a look at my life of what are you doing, and decided something needed to change. And I have a friend who always celebrates the idea of taking naps, right? Now, we've been groomed that if you take a nap that, it must be that you're lazy. But I started thinking there may be something to this. And I flipped the switch on how I looked at rest. Instead of rest being something that happened at the end of the day when I ran out of gas, is rest then became, what do I need to fuel myself to set myself up better for the next day? And when I flipped that switch, everything changed. But my highest, I'll share with the audience, was emotional rest. And my lowest deficit was spiritual rest. So maybe, can you speak to maybe what might be happening with me for emotional rest? What are some things in that?
Yeah. So emotional rest has 2 components to it. The component that I don't know you well enough to know kind of your specific life details, but the component that I find that a lot of people are experiencing that leads to an emotional rest deficit is that they carry a level of what I call professional emotional labor. And the best way I can describe that is to give a couple of examples. Like if you're someone who works in customer service, let's say you're a flight attendant or someone like that, and you're serving someone who's not very nice. They're being a jerk. And when they're being a jerk, you still keep a smile on your face. You still try to be hospitable to them. Well, in my case, emotional rest was also the one that I had the greatest deficit in. Well, I don't have to be nice necessarily to patients if I don't want to be. You've probably met some very rude doctors in your history. So it's not like a requirement that I have to be nice. But I do have requirements and ownership to how I show up in the hospital. I'm an internist, so there's work that I do. And oftentimes when I'm in the ICU type setting, I'm treating people that I have some type of relationship with. I'm in a small town. So these aren't strangers to me. They're people that I have seen in my office. I sometimes know their family, and I've seen their dog and their grandkids and all those things. And because I'm an empath, I have a tendency to be very kind of tenderhearted. And so when I'm in that situation, every part of my being may want to burst out in tears because my friend is who's dying on that table. However, the professional emotional labor of that job requires that I keep my emotions in check. So I won't cry. You will never see a tear drop from my eye in the ICU because it doesn't serve the patient, the family, my nursing staff. It is not appropriate. However, those emotions are still in me. They still need to be processed, and not releasing them creates this burden, this heaviness that over time is going to become an emotional rest deficit. And so I think a lot of us carry a professional emotional labor, whether you're a parent. Let's take, for example, with COVID, you're a parent, you lose your job. You don't tell your kids, we could be broke and homeless in another 3 months if I don't get a job. You carry the emotional labor of that because you put on a good front and keep going. You get diagnosed with cancer and you don't want to worry your parents. You just keep going. There's a lot of professional emotional labor, and people are carrying it in different ways. Another way sometimes people have emotional rest deficits is because they never feel like there's a place where they can truly just be who they are without being judged. And so if it's there's a level of people pleasing behavior kind of up under that keeps people always in a bit of a inauthenticity. Professional emotional labor is being inauthentic for a reason, like you're purposefully being that way, but you know why you're being that way. It's for a greater good. There are other times we're that way up because of fear, because we don't want to be seen a certain way, because we don't want to appear, however we feel like it's a bad way to appear. And so I think we have to kind of just look for ourselves. How many times within a day or within a month are we finding those opportunities to be real, raw, and authentic about what we're feeling? And unfortunately, it's not just about saying, I'm sad today. It's actually going a little bit deeper with emotional rest. It's about what is inside of you being awakened in a negative way. Like, is something making you feel insecure? Is something making you feel less than? Is something making you feel like an imposter or whatever it is? All of those types of emotions have a tendency to add to that feeling.
Yes, and I can relate to several of those things you said, but I think also, when I was growing up, the idea, and this is very dated, of course, I'm a little bit older, the idea was when you grew up that one of your roles you would take as a partner or as a mother would be to make everything right for other people, right? Make everyone else comfortable. And I wonder if this has any relation to your other book that you've written, Saundra, on the 7 lies women tell themselves, that we are, we're not the perfect mother unless we make sure our children are happy, or, we need to make sure that we have a very calm and peaceful home. Are those some of those things that tie into that emotional deficit, rest deficit?
Yes, it's interesting you said that, because Set Free to Live Free, the book you're referring to, I included emotions as part of that because it is a huge issue for a lot of people. However, that it also talks about things like comparison, perfectionism, which are also big areas, image, because all of them add sometimes to our inauthenticity, that desire we have to protect ourselves by not being the fullest version of ourselves. And I think, the emotional rest ties very closely to social rest, which social rest deals with the actual people in our lives, looking at how they pull on our social energy. Are they negatively pulling on our social energy, meaning they need things, not that they're negative people, but that they need things from us? So there are people who are putting demands on our time and our attention. Or are they positively pouring into us socially, meaning that they are life-giving? They're the people who we feel like fill us back up, who are energizing and encouraging to us. And too often, most of us, we have an abundance of people who are negatively pulling from our social energy. Like you said, you're a mom, you're giving, 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 but who's giving to you? Who's pouring back into you? Who's nurturing the nurturer? Because that then can add to its own level of imbalance and rest deficit.
Yes, I could see that being very apparent for caregivers of people who have elderly parents, or perhaps people with chronic disease, that you're the caregiver. There's nobody pouring back into you. And so making that a priority would be very important. I was really, I want to say, just very intrigued by some of the questions in the rest quiz. So things I never really related as causing a rest deficit in me. So, for instance, there is a question about if you are surrounded by or how you're impacted by bright lights and loud noise, and what impact that may have on you. Tell me what type of rest that might tie into.
Yeah, so I try not to decipher the quiz because then people who take it kind of
Well, no, yes,
try to fish around
yes,
to make sure
game
they're
it.
right. So make sure they pass it is what some people say.
Oh,
But
yeah,
nobody wants to fail the test is what
right.
I often hear. But the really for all of the questions, every question is specific for a specific type of rest. Some of them are more obvious, some of them are less obvious. And honestly, that's on purpose that we do that because because it is very easy for some of the questions to someone say, oh, well, this is definitely about whatever. And then, if they feel like I'm good with that, they'll rank themselves automatically higher. Whereas the ones like you're saying where you're like, I never really thought about that. That's the point. To hit you with some questions you've never really thought about in the hopes to bypass your logical brain and actually hit your heart so that you truly answer honestly on as many of them as possible without the logical brain kicking in and trying to understand it. We find that the score changes with people as they go through life in different life situations, as it should, because the score is really a kind of a snapshot on how you're feeling today in this moment with whatever's going on with you. Kind of as you mentioned, had you taken it 6 months ago, it could have been very different. And that's what we recommend a lot of people do. Take the test, take the quiz, the rest quiz, see what your scores are, implement some of the different rest strategies we talk about in my book, Sacred Rest. For each type of rest, we talk about different ways of getting rest. Begin to implement, whatever feels authentic to you, what feels like a good fit for you. And then take the quiz later, a couple of months later, 6 months, 8 months later, to see how you're progressing, to be able to see how you're improving in that area. One of the types of rest that a lot of people are not as familiar with is sensory rest, which has to do with things related to light, sounds, and some of those different kind of things, and being aware of how different sensory inputs affect you. And the side effects of fatigue that come when we don't deal with our sensory rest deficits, or we don't deal with sensory overload syndrome, which a lot of us, battle with because of our overuse of gadgets and devices and noise and all the things.
Yes, just having to react. And I could see where your nervous system would get activated in that. And that is taxing on us. That really does draw out a lot of the energy. So I was thinking about when we take this quiz, and we don't want to reveal anything else because we want it to be authentic. We want people to be able to get an accurate thing of there really is no passing it. There is no pass or fail on the quiz. It's building your self-awareness. So what have you noticed when people have taken the quiz? Have you had discussions with people who are changing their behavior as a result of taking the quiz?
Oh, yeah. I've had so many people tell me, hey, I took your quiz. I went to restquiz.com and I got my scores back. And, I oftentimes what I hear is I didn't agree necessarily with the results because I was like, I don't even know how that's possible. Yeah. But then I implemented, a restorative practice in that area. And that was the problem. I'm all of a sudden feeling better. And I love it. I love that they question it because that's the point. I need you to question if what you're doing right now is not working, then the best thing I can do for you is to help you think different. And if there's not that conflict moment where you're like, could that be it? Is she right? Is she wrong? If we don't hit that conflict moment, no change ever happens.
Yes.
And so I love that people, they have that moment where they're doubting. They're like, could that be it? And then if they're willing to take that next step, that's when we start seeing the change occurs. And some people aren't. Some people, they get their scores. We even when the scores come out, we're like, this is the first step. This is the diagnosis part of it. Somebody comes in and I diagnose them with diabetes. That's step one. We haven't solved a thing. We've just identified where there's an opportunity for improvement. And I love that often people, after they see or they kind of get that revelation that, oh, I didn't know this, they want to bring other people into it. They want to bring the people they care about with them. and that, they extend a hand out and say, hey, you need to check this out. I think it would help you too.
Yes, because I think we suddenly become aware and we see that like our actions are having consequences. And, here we know, doctor knows best, right? You're coming in and helping us see and reveal that to us, which I think is so great. So that's only the start, Saundra. What's the next step once we take that rest quiz?
Yeah, really the next step is to then dive into the restorative practices. And something you mentioned is that there is a reframing of even how we view the term rest.
Mm-hmm.
I think too often we think about it as stopping or cessation. People hear it and they think, oh, I need to take a vacation or carve out this big chunk of time or, fit it in at the end of the day or something like that. And that is absolutely not what I'm talking about. I actually, in my book, Sacred Rest, one of the first chapters or so talks about vacations are not how we solve this. That is not what I'm talking about. What I'm referring to are restorative practices, activities you can add into the middle of your busy day that you can kind of bind with other habits you're already doing so that you don't even have to find time necessarily. You're just integrating it into your space of what you're already doing. And I think that's the change of heart that has to happen. It's not about stopping, or cessation really. It's about restoration. How do we pour back into the places that we're depleting and do so in such a way that we never get to the point of complete depletion? We're constantly in a filling up of ourselves, our creativity, our physical energy, our social energy, all these areas. How do we constantly keep them in a state of being filled so we never get to a point of true depletion?
Yes. No, that's really good. That's really good of being able to take action and do something on that. So many of the listeners of this podcast are really considering either entrepreneurship or they're already there, right? So they're looking at what can I do? They feel a call of their purpose, to bring themselves a little bit more into the world, to live more fully. They're very passionate about it. So when you see people who have this passion, they're driven by purpose. They're not someone that you would always think of as they're going to lay back on their laurels, right? They're going to take time to rest. So what are some warning signs for those of us who are passionate, who have something calling us in? What would be some warning signs that we may be sabotaging ourselves?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Well, the World Health Organization actually has a clinical definition of what rest is. Number one is you're tired all the time. Number two is you no longer have passion for the work that you do. Mm-hmm. And then number three, the work that you do is at a lesser capacity of what you're able to do. And so I think when you start noticing any of those things, you're always exhausted. You're not even excited about the thing that you're excited about. Then I think that's when you have to start evaluating, is this shifting? I know for myself, that's really where things kind of came to a head. I've never wanted to be anything other than to be a doctor. Since I was 5-year-old and I had that little operation game that would, every time you touch the side, I was hooked. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. And so for me to get to a point where I had the career of my dreams, I was in the house of my dreams with the man of my dreams, with the 2 kids that I'd been, begging God for, because getting pregnant wasn't easy for us. And so I literally had everything I'd asked for and I was still not happy. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day coming home from getting the kids from daycare and, working at the office and the hospital and just laying on my foyer floor, looking up at the chandelier in this gigantic house thinking, how did I get here? It's like people looking on the outside would be like, she has the life. She has, I already had books. She has book contracts and I was already doing radio and TV. I was doing all of these things and I had all the makings of success in a life that felt horrific to live. I had no joy, no peace. My physical body actually ached from the amount of stress I carried on a regular day. And I think that's the thing. When you're an entrepreneur, you're building a life. Is the life you're building a life you enjoy living? Because eventually what you build is what you have to live in. And so we have to make sure that what we're building is something that feels successful, not just looks successful. And so a big part of that is making sure that you stay in a passionate pursuit of what you're doing and you have the energy for what you're passionate about. because the combination of the two, that's really, you mentioned your spiritual rest scores were good. Spiritual rest is not just a faith-based process. It includes that sense of purpose that we have, that sense of connecting to something, a kind of a humanity and a greater cause. Being able to stay connected to that while also feeling connected with your relationships, connected with your physical body, connected with your creativity, that's the type of entrepreneur that goes to the top and actually enjoys the position when they get there.
Yes. Oh my, so many things about that. So I can imagine you laying on the floor of your foyer, looking up at what I'm sure is a beautiful chandelier, and people thinking that you do have it all. But Saundra, this is kind of like the big lie, right? So here's what you need to do to be successful. These are all the things that you have when you're successful, but yet it's that internal connection. It's that feeling of peace. It's that settling. And I don't mean like minimizing, but it's settling in and grounding yourself into what true happiness is. And I don't think it sounds like you could be happy if you don't have that rest.
I don't believe you can. I believe we have a lot of people who never get to that place of what I term a well-rested life. It's a life where things work in harmony with each other, not balance. I don't believe in work-life balance.
Yes.
I believe there's work-life harmony where there's a natural ebb and flow, and it creates something beautiful. You can stop and it's good. You can push hard and it's good. I'm a type A workaholic type person. I am still a type A workaholic type person. My personality didn't change just because I became, as you said, the poster child for rest.
Yes.
I'm still me. I still work long hours, but I've learned how to restore myself continuously in the process. I'm as driven now as I was then, but I'm not burned out. I actually enjoy my life. I can smile. I can laugh with people. I can hang out with friends and watch fireworks and then go and do a deal, with a company. It's a completely different way of living. And I feel like most entrepreneurs, that's actually what they're wanting. They're wanting the freedom to not just, lifestyle freedom, but actual personal freedom to fully be who they are without apology, and to have a level of emotional and social and relational rest where they show up in the world authentic. I don't hide who I am. Someone goes on my Instagram, they're going to be like, oh, she's heavy in faith. Yes, I am. And I'm not unapologetic about that. Because for me to live a life that is authentic to me and to be fully well rested means I have to show up in my authenticity, whether you like me or not. That is not my responsibility. And I feel too often we cower to that. And there is no success when you don't show up fully for yourself.
Saundra, you could beat that drum all day here on this show. Like that is what I'm all about, and that's what I truly believe in. And what a beautiful way to sum that up. So, I want to wrap up here as we come to an end of this conversation. Is your work within companies. We are now in a time where now mental health is not something that is talked about behind the door. Like we realize that we need to take care of our people. We realize that our people are on a road to burnout. We realize that our company culture will only be as healthy as what we allow it to be. So tell us a little bit about how you have worked with companies.
Yeah, that's been the best part of this transition from clinical medicine over into workplace well-being. A big part of what we do at my company, Restorative, is helping companies first evaluate where their teams and leaders are. I think too often we have leadership that is burning out, which then affects the rest of their team. Because if your managers and your C-suite staff are all feeling the burnout sensation, they're all feeling kind of overworked, overwhelmed, underjoyed, then what ends up happening is these are your advocates within your company that are then infiltrating the culture throughout the rest of your organization. And so what we've been doing is we spend a lot of time working with the heads of companies, working with the leaders, actually helping them get a deeper understanding of what workplace well-being can look like, And not just from the sense of, oh, we have benefits. Oh, we have a package where you can sign up and get mental health. But actually, what does it look like when you lead your team and you know you're in the middle of an acquisition and you know there's stress there? What is a conversation you can integrate naturally within your weekly meeting that helps people experience social rest in the moment? What are ways to help encourage sensory rest when you're doing back-to-back Zoom trainings? What are ways we can actually evaluate the physical health of people just in helping them be aware of the body ergonomics of their workstation? I mean, these are things that are easy to integrate within a company, but they require a level of intentionality and mindfulness to be able to do it. And I find because most companies are not physicians or healthcare practitioners, nor have they also had the running of a company. I am part of a 10 practice physician group where I'm in part ownership with. So to have someone who understands what it looks like to run a large team of people, as well as the care for people in general in the body, there's a different approach that comes to it. And it's helpful to have that type of insight to actually help someone see these are ways to integrate this so that not only do you improve your bottom line for your company, because they're not getting sick. They're not quitting because their work-life imbalance has overwhelmed them. They're not getting to a place where they look for help. They look for another job simply because there is no respect for them as a person within this company, or at least that's their interpretation of it, because no one's verbalizing it in a way that they can see that they're seen and that they are important to the organization. I think there's so many layers to what a culture looks like. And too often we make it one-dimensional rather than multifaceted, which is what people are. We're multifaceted, and you have to approach it from a multifaceted approach.
Very true. Very true. I love all of this, of looking at how the integration comes in. So we've taken the rest quiz. I see that you have a newsletter available as well.
Yes. So we, once a month, usually, sometimes a little bit more than that, we send out some of my favorite research oftentimes is what's in there. I am always in evaluation mode of things that are happening in the world. So usually some of my favorite research, some of my favorite articles and things that are popping up, updates on different things that we're doing as well, places I might be speaking or different products that we may have available. So yeah, we're always kind of trying to make sure people stay on top of it.
Yes, because this is not something, a rest quiz, you take it and you know your score and then you keep moving on. If you want to make change, if you want to make transformational change, you need to be intentional and take action to do it. So I encourage everyone to take the rest quiz. We'll put that link in the show notes, as well as sign up for Dr. Saundra's newsletter as well, so we can stay up to date. So there you've heard it, folks, from the international thought leader and the media expert on mind, body, and spirit connection. You now are aware of the types of rest. You have a quiz to take and some follow-up action tips to follow. Saundra, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you have changed lives in this conversation. And for you, listener, I'm going to encourage you that before you go chase your passion, that you fill your tank with the fuel that rest can bring. You'll bring more of your purpose into the world when you start from solid ground, and your personal brand of integrity will shine brighter when the whole of you can show up. It's the way to set yourself up to live a life of so much more on the way to becoming your legendary self. Saundra, thank you.
Thank you.